Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the totally captivating, almost cinematic world of alien abductions. But hey, we aren't just going to sit around recounting spooky campfire tales. No, we're going to conduct a grounded, scientific investigation into one of the most famous abduction claims in history. And then, we're diving into the incredibly fascinating psychology behind why people genuinely believe these things happen to them. All right, let's jump right in. So, I want you to think about this for a second. What happens when you vividly remember something that is literally impossible? This is the central puzzle we're decoding today. I mean, when someone claims they were beamed aboard a spaceship, the absolute easiest reaction is to just call them a liar, right? But what if they aren't lying? What if the human brain is actually capable of constructing a reality so vivid, so utterly terrifying that the person experiencing it genuinely believes it to be 100% true? As we're going to see, human memory is incredibly powerful, but it's also surprisingly fragile. To set the stage here, picture this. It's November 5th, 1975. A 22-year-old forestry worker named Travis Walton literally vanishes without a trace in the woods of Arizona. Now, when the police finally knock on his mother's door at 1:30 in the morning to tell her that her son disappeared after supposedly running toward a UFO, no less, her reaction was shockingly calm. She just said, well, that's the way these things happen. Right? That utter lack of surprise immediately injected this massive layer of intrigue into a case that was about to capture the entire world's attention.
So, let's get into Section 1, Anatomy of an Abduction, Decoding the Extraterrestrial Encounter.
Before we look deeper into Travis Walton's specific disappearance, we kind of need to understand the basic framework of these stories. Folklorist Thomas E. Bullard actually analyzed hundreds of these reports and found a surprisingly rigid script for these bizarre events. It usually goes like this. First, you have the capture, where the subject is completely immobilized and taken to a craft. Next comes the examination, which usually involves some pretty invasive, frankly bizarre medical procedures. Then, sometimes, a conference happens, where the beings communicate telepathically with the captive. And finally, the return, where the person is dropped right back here on Earth.
Now, right at the onset of these events, people frequently report this weird shift in consciousness. British researchers actually call it the Oz factor. It's like the external world just completely fades away. Sound ceases. The strange, unnatural calm washes over the person. And the absolute most famous symptom? Missing time. Abductees are often returned to their exact original location with zero explicit memory of what just happened. They only realize something is totally off when they check a clock and see that hours or even whole days have just completely vanished.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Travis Walton case, 5 days in November. This is honestly one of the most sensationalized cases in all of ufology. It's a high-stakes true story that has fueled decades of intense debate. So on November 5th, Walton's logging crew reported that he ran toward this glowing object, got hit by a beam of light, and just vanished. Gone. For days, the police actually treated it as a murder investigation. They were out there using a helicopter to scour the woods on November 7th. By November 10th, the story had absolutely blown up, making international headlines. And then on November 11th, 5 full days after he disappeared, Walton calls his sister Colette. He's at a phone booth in the nearby town of Heber, and he is sounding incredibly confused and frantic. So what exactly did Walton say happened during those 5 missing days? Well, he gave these highly specific, honestly cinematic details. He claimed he woke up in this hospital-like room surrounded by 3 short, bald creatures. He totally panicked, grabbed a glass-like cylinder, and literally fought them off physically. Then, he claimed he ran into another room where he bumped into a human-like figure wearing a helmet. This figure ultimately forced a clear plastic mask over his face, making him black out, only to wake up later on the side of the highway. But was it real? Let's pivot to Section 3, Anatomy of a Hoax, the Motives and the Methods. It's an incredible story, right? But for this explainer, we really have to look at all the evidence and apply some methodical, skeptical investigation. Let's talk about a potential motive. Walton's logging crew was seriously behind schedule on a major federal forestry contract. If they missed their looming November 10th deadline, they were facing a steep $2,500 penalty, not to mention losing future contracts. But, and here's the kicker, federal contracts happen to include an act of God clause. This excuses delays caused by unforeseeable, extraordinary circumstances. Skeptics are quick to point out that an alien abduction of a crew member, well, that's a pretty convenient loophole to avoid a massive financial hit. And then there's the timing of it all. On October 20th, 1975, NBC aired this massive primetime movie called The UFO Incident, starring James Earl Jones. It was all about the famous Barney and Betty Hill abduction, and the crew chief actually admitted later on that he watched it. Literally 2 weeks later, Travis Walton vanishes, utilizing the exact same narrative template that was just broadcast on national television. Psychologists have noted that anyone with even a little bit of imagination could have watched that movie and realized exactly how to become an instant celebrity. Now, a crucial point people always bring up is the polygraph tests. Proponents hold these up as ultimate proof. The tabloid National Enquirer administered a test, declared the crew passed with flying colors, and even gave them a $5,000 prize for the UFO case of the year. But there's a catch. A freelance polygraph examiner named Jack McCarthy also tested Walton, and his conclusion? He found Walton was engaging in gross deception by intentionally holding his breath to beat the machine. Naturally, the tabloid completely buried this failed test to protect their incredibly profitable sensation. But what about the spaceship? What about that crazy beam of light? Well, researcher Robert Schaefer proposed a much more grounded hypothesis. Right near the cruise route was the Gentry Fire Lookout Tower. This was a 70-foot-tall structure out in the forest, fully equipped with a generator and a super powerful spotlight. Schaefer suggests the crew simply used that lit-up tower in the pitch dark to stage the spaceship beam, and that Walton just hid out in the tower's living quarters for 5 days while the cops scoured the woods down below. Let's move on to Section 4, the science of memory, when the brain believes the impossible. Whether Walton's specific case was a deliberate hoax or not, the fact remains that thousands of people all over the world genuinely believe they have been taken. How is that even possible? To understand this, we have to look at a Harvard Medical School study that used something called the Dease/Rodiger-McDermott paradigm. That's a mouthful. But basically, it's a rigorous psychological test used to measure just how easily a person's brain can create false memories. The Harvard researchers used this exact test on 3 groups: people who claim recovered memories of an abduction, people who believe they were abducted but have no memories of it, and a standard control group. And the results? They were incredibly revealing. The study actually found that the people reporting recovered memories of alien abduction were significantly more prone to exhibiting false recall. The researchers even identified a specific psychological cocktail of traits that predicts this susceptibility. We're talking about high hypnotic suggestibility, depressive symptoms, a really rich fantasy life, previous New Age beliefs, and experiences with sleep paralysis. All of these things mixed together make a person highly vulnerable to generating a false memory and genuinely truly believing it is real. And unfortunately, this vulnerability is often exploited, totally unintentionally, in therapy. It creates this really dangerous feedback loop. Step 1. A client goes to a therapist looking for answers about puzzling things like sleep paralysis or missing time. Step 2. A therapist who might be using hypnosis suggests or frames these weird experiences as a UFO abduction by asking leading questions. Then, Step 3. The client, who just desperately wants some kind of closure, adopts the victim role, and the therapist ratifies this new, entirely fabricated memory. It feels 100% real to the patient, but the reality is it was planted. Finally, we absolutely have to talk about the power of the sleeping brain. There was this fascinating 2021 study focusing on lucid dreamers, people who can actually control their dreams during REM sleep. Researchers instructed these volunteers to actively try and emulate an alien abduction while they were dreaming. The results were completely astounding. 75% of them successfully generated an alien encounter experience that perfectly mimicked the exact details found in classic abduction lore, complete with sleep paralysis and intense fear. This strongly suggests that spontaneous REM sleep states are likely responsible for a huge chunk of real-world abduction claims. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. At the end of the day, the mystery of alien abduction is less about visitors coming down from another world and way more about the incredible and honestly sometimes terrifying power of the human mind. All the evidence points us toward a reality where false memories, media influence, and deep sleep states are what construct these truths. So I want to leave you with this. If our minds can vividly construct an entire journey to the stars, what else in your own life are you misremembering? Thanks so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning what you think you know.